She just wanted to go home. But she unknowingly disrespected a police officer who changed her life. Before we dive into this emotional journey, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. And hey, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now, let's go back to that night. The night when exhaustion met duty, and two lives collided in the most unexpected way. The fluorescent lights of County General Hospital buzzed overhead like angry insects, casting a cold, sterile glow across the empty hallway. Emily Carter stood at the nurse's station, her scrubs wrinkled, her hair tied back in a messy bun that had long given up its shape. 27 years old, and tonight she felt twice that. Her shift had started at 6 in the evening. Now the clock on the wall read 2:43 in the morning. 8 hours had stretched into nearly 9, filled with endless rounds, demanding patience. And one particularly difficult case that had left her emotionally drained. An elderly man, Mr. Harrison, had coded twice that night. Both times, Emily had been there, hands steady, heart pounding, fighting to bring him back. And both times, she'd succeeded. But the weight of those moments clung to her like a second skin. She pulled off her latex gloves with a tired sigh, tossing them into the biohazard bin near the counter. Her colleague, Janet, a nurse in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, looked up from her paperwork. "You okay, honey?" Janet asked softly. Emily forced a smile. "Yeah, just ready to go home. You worked a double again, didn't you?" Emily nodded. There was no point denying it. The truth was, she needed the extra shifts. Her younger brother, Marcus, was starting college in the fall, and their parents weren't around to help anymore. It was just the two of them now, and if that meant working until her feet ached and her eyes burned, then so be it. "Get some rest," Janet said, her voice warm with concern. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse." "I will," Emily promised, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. She grabbed her bag from the locker room, changed out of her scrubs, and pulled on a faded hoodie and jeans. The hospital parking lot was nearly empty at this hour, just a handful of cars scattered under the dim streetlights. Her car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a dented bumper and a stubborn engine, sat in the far corner. She'd bought it used 3 years ago, and it had been giving her trouble ever since. But it was hers, and it got her from point A to point B. Most of the time, Emily slid into the driver's seat, the familiar smell of old coffee and vanilla air freshener filling her nose. She turned the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Come on, girl," she whispered, patting the dashboard. "Just get me home." The streets were quiet as she pulled out of the lot, almost eerie in their emptiness. The city had a different face at this hour, one that most people never saw. Streetlights flickered, shadows stretched long and dark. The occasional car passed by, headlights cutting through the night like searchlights. Emily drove in silence, too tired even for music. Her mind wandered, replaying the night's events. Mr. Harrison's pale face, the sound of the defibrillator charging, the relief when his heartbeat returned. She wondered if he'd make it through the week. She hoped he would. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Daniel Reyes sat in his patrol car, parked at the corner of 5th and Main. His radio crackled with static and occasional chatter from dispatch. It had been a long night for him, too. A domestic disturbance call, 2 drunk drivers, a fender bender that had tied up traffic for an hour. And now, as the night crept toward morning, he was running on black coffee and sheer willpower. Daniel was 35, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair cut military short and eyes that missed nothing. He'd been a cop for 12 years, and in that time, he'd seen more than most people could imagine. But he'd also learned that the job wasn't just about enforcing the law. It was about reading people, understanding them, knowing when to push and when to pull back. Tonight, though, he was on edge. There had been complaints about reckless drivers in this part of the city. Teenagers racing through red lights, speeding down residential streets. It was only a matter of time before someone got hurt, and Daniel had no intention of letting that happen. He took a sip of his coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste. It had gone cold an hour ago. He checked his watch. Almost 3 in the morning. Another hour and he'd be off duty. Another hour and he could go home. Maybe catch a few hours of sleep before his next shift. But for now, he stayed alert, eyes scanning the intersection ahead. That's when he saw it. A car, an old Honda, rolling slowly through the intersection. Not speeding, not swerving, just moving. He watched as it came to a stop at the red light just ahead. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. And yet Daniel's instincts, honed by years on the job, told him to pay attention. He shifted his patrol car into gear and eased forward, keeping a safe distance. The light turned green. The Honda didn't move. Daniel frowned. The light stayed green. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Still, the Honda sat there, engine idling, not moving. Then, the driver honked once, twice, a long, frustrated blast that echoed through the empty street. Daniel's jaw tightened. He flipped on his lights and pulled up behind the car. Emily stared at the dashboard in disbelief, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The engine had died, again, right there at the intersection, with the light glowing green above her like a mocking beacon. No, 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 she muttered, turning the key. The engine made a weak, pathetic sound like a dying animal. Come on, she tried again. Nothing. Frustration bubbled up inside her, hot and sharp. She slammed her palm against the steering wheel, the horn blaring into the silent night. Once, twice, 3 times, each honk louder than the last, a release of all the exhaustion and stress she'd been holding in for the past 9 hours. Just start, she shouted, her voice cracking. She didn't notice the flashing red and blue lights behind her until they reflected off her rearview mirror, painting her face in alternating colors. Her heart sank. Oh no. She glanced back and saw the patrol car, its lights spinning, its presence unmistakable. A police officer stepped out, tall and imposing in his uniform, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He walked toward her car with slow, deliberate steps, one hand resting casually on his belt. Emily's pulse quickened. She wasn't in trouble, was she? She hadn't done anything wrong. Her car had just stalled. That was all. But the way he approached, the set of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes, made her feel like she'd committed a crime. Officer Daniel Reyes stopped beside her window and tapped on the glass with his knuckle. Emily fumbled with the button, rolling it down halfway. The night air rushed in, cool and sharp. Evening, Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. License and registration, please? Emily blinked. I'm sorry, what? Your license and registration, he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. I didn't do anything wrong, Emily stammered, her mind racing. My car just stalled. I was trying to get it started. You were honking, Daniel interrupted, his eyes narrowing slightly, disrobing the peace. And you're blocking the intersection. Blocking the... Emily's frustration flared again. Officer, my car died. I wasn't honking at anyone. I was just... Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down. I am calm, she snapped, louder than she intended. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and electric. Daniel's expression hardened. He straightened, his posture shifting from casual to authoritative in an instant. Step out of the vehicle. Please. Emily's stomach dropped. What? Why? Because I asked you to. Her hands trembled as she unbuckled her seatbelt and pushed open the door. She stepped out onto the pavement, her legs unsteady beneath her. The exhaustion she'd been fighting all night suddenly felt overwhelming, like a weight pressing down on her chest. Daniel studied her, his gaze sharp and assessing. He noticed the hospital badge clipped to her hoodie, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands shook ever so slightly. But he also noticed the defiance in her posture, the way she looked at him, not with fear but with irritation. Do you know why I pulled you over? He asked. Because my car broke down? Emily shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Daniel's jaw tightened. Watch your tone. I'm sorry, but I don't understand what I did wrong, Emily said, fighting to keep her voice steady. I just want to go home. I've been working all night and I'm tired, and my car won't start. And now you're treating me like I'm some kind of criminal. I'm not treating you like a criminal. Daniel said, his voice cool. "I'm doing my job. Now, license and registration." Emily bit back the angry words threatening to spill out. She reached into her car, grabbed her purse, and fumbled through it with shaking hands. Her wallet. Where was her wallet? She pulled out receipts, a pack of gum, a crumpled tissue. There. She yanked out her driver's license and thrust it toward him. Daniel took it, examining it under his flashlight. Emily Carter, 27, address across town. Everything looked legitimate, but something about her demeanor bothered him, the way she'd snapped. The way she looked at him, like he was the problem, like he was the one making her night difficult. He'd dealt with people like this before. People who thought the rules didn't apply to them. People who thought they could talk their way out of anything. "Wait here," he said, turning back toward his patrol car. Emily stood there, alone in the middle of the street, the weight of the night pressing down on her. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not now." Daniel sat in his car, running her information through the system. Clean record, no warrants, no previous incidents. So why did this feel wrong? He glanced back at her through his windshield. She stood with her arms crossed, her head down, looking small and defeated under the streetlight. And for just a moment, Daniel hesitated. Daniel stepped out of his patrol car, clipboard in hand, his expression unreadable. Emily watched him approach, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. She'd never been pulled over before, never had a ticket, never had a reason to fear a police officer. But right now, standing in the middle of an empty intersection at 3 in the morning, she felt like she was on trial for a crime she didn't commit. "Everything checks out," Daniel said as he stopped in front of her, his voice neutral. "No warrants, clean record?" Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "So, I can go?" "Not yet." He clicked his pen, the sound sharp in the silence. "I'm writing you a citation." Her eyes widened. "A citation? For what?" "Disturbing the peace. Honking unnecessarily, and failure to maintain control of your vehicle. Failure to..." Emily's voice cracked. "My car stalled. I didn't do anything." "You honked repeatedly," Daniel said. His tone clipped. "In a residential area, at 3 in the morning. That's a violation. I honked because my car wouldn't start," Emily shouted, her exhaustion finally boiling over. "I wasn't honking at you. I was frustrated with my car." "Lower your voice," Daniel warned, his hand moving instinctively toward his belt. Emily's breath hitched. She wasn't stupid. She knew what that gesture meant. She knew how quickly this could escalate. But the unfairness of it all, the sheer, maddening unfairness, made it impossible to stay silent. "I've been on my feet for 9 hours, she said, her voice shaking. "I've saved lives tonight. I've held the hand of a dying man. I've cleaned up blood and vomit and..." Her voice broke. "I just want to go home." Daniel's pen hovered over the citation. For the first time, he really looked at her. Not as a suspect. Not as a problem, but as a person. He saw the hospital badge, St. Mary's County General, registered nurse. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the tremor in her hands, the way she was barely holding herself together, and he saw something else, something that made his chest tighten. He saw his sister, not literally, of course. Emily looked nothing like Sophia, but the exhaustion, the desperation, the feeling of being at the end of her rope, that he recognized. Sophia had been a teacher. She'd worked long hours, stayed late to help struggling students, poured everything she had into her job. And one night, driving home after parent-teacher conferences, she'd been too tired to notice the red light. The accident had been instant. The other driver, a drunk teenager, had walked away with a few scratches. Sophia hadn't walked away at all. Daniel blinked, forcing the memory back into the dark corner of his mind where he kept it locked away. He looked down at the citation in his hand. Then, slowly, he lowered his pen. "When did your shift start?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Emily blinked, caught off guard by the question. "What?" Your shift. When did it start? 6 p.m., she said cautiously. Why? And you've been working since then? Yes. Daniel glanced at his watch. That's 9 hours. 9.5, Emily corrected, her voice flat. Not that it matters. He looked at her car, still sitting dead in the middle of the intersection. Can you get it started? I don't know, she admitted, her shoulders sagging. It does this sometimes. If I wait a few minutes, it usually Denise, Daniel said suddenly, tucking the citation back into his clipboard. Try it now. Emily hesitated, then climbed back into the driver's seat. She turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then nothing. She tried again. Same result. Daniel leaned down, his face level with her window. Pop the hood. What? Pop the hood, he repeated. Let me take a look. Emily stared at him, confused, but did as he asked. The hood clicked open, and Daniel walked around to the front of the car. He lifted it, propping it open with the metal rod, and peered inside. When's the last time you had this thing serviced? He called out. Emily leaned out the window. I don't know, a few months ago. Your battery cables are corroded, he said, jiggling one of them. And your alternator belt looks like it's hanging on by a thread. I don't have money for repairs right now, Emily said, her voice small. Daniel didn't respond. He reached into his patrol car, grabbed a bottle of water, and poured a little over the battery terminals. Then he pulled a rag from his trunk and wiped them clean. Try it now, he said. Emily turned the key. The engine hesitated, then roared to life. She stared at the dashboard in shock. How did you… Corrosion, Daniel said simply, closing the hood. Blocks the connection. You'll need to get that looked at soon, or it's going to die on you again. Emily nodded numbly. Thank you. Daniel walked back to her window, his expression softer now. You okay to drive? Yeah, she said quietly. I think so. He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Look, I'm not going to give you a ticket. Emily's head snapped up. You're not? No. He tore the citation off his clipboard and crumpled it in his fist. But I am going to follow you. Follow me? There's a diner about 2 miles from here, he said. Open 24 hours. You're going to pull in there, and you're going to sit down and have a cup of coffee before you drive home. I'm fine, Emily protested weakly. You're not, Daniel said firmly. You're exhausted, and if you fall asleep at the wheel… He stopped himself, his jaw tightening. Just do it, please. Emily opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Something in his voice, something raw and real, made her nod. Okay, Daniel stepped back, gesturing toward the road. Go on, I'll be right behind you. Emily put the car in gear and drove, and in her rearview mirror, she saw the patrol car's headlights, following her through the night. The neon sign of Eddie's Diner flickered weakly against the dark sky, casting a pale pink glow across the empty parking lot. Emily pulled her Honda into a spot near the entrance, the engine still running, her hands still gripping the steering wheel. She sat there for a moment, staring at the building through the windshield, trying to make sense of what had just happened. A police officer, the same one who'd been ready to write her a ticket 5 minutes ago, was now escorting her to a diner for coffee because he was worried about her. It didn't make sense. Behind her, Daniel's patrol car pulled in, its headlights illuminating the back of her car. She watched in the rearview mirror as he stepped out, adjusted his belt, and walked toward her door. Emily turned off the engine and climbed out, her legs stiff and aching. The cool night air hit her face, sharp and sobering. This okay? Daniel asked, nodding toward the diner. Emily glanced at the building. Through the window, she could see a handful of people scattered across the booths, truck drivers and night shift workers. People like her who existed in the margins of the world. The fluorescent lights inside were harsh and uninviting, but there was something comforting about it too. A place that didn't judge, a place that was just there. Yeah, she said quietly. It's fine. They walked inside together, the door chiming as they entered. A waitress behind the counter, a woman in her 60s with bleached blonde hair and a tired smile, looked up from her magazine. "Evening, Officer Reyes," she said warmly. "The usual? Just coffee tonight, Doris," Daniel replied, sliding into a booth near the window. He gestured for Emily to sit across from him. She hesitated, then sat down, her bag sliding off her shoulder and onto the seat beside her. Doris appeared a moment later with 2 mugs and a steaming pot of coffee, filling both without asking. "You need anything else?" "Honey?" Doris asked. Looking at Emily with kind eyes, Emily shook her head. "Oh, thank you." Doris smiled and walked away, leaving them alone in the corner booth. Silence settled over the table, thick and awkward. Emily wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. She didn't drink it, just held it. Daniel took a sip of his, then set it down, his hands folded on the table in front of him. He looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time that night, Emily felt seen. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly. Emily blinked. "What? I'm sorry," Daniel repeated, his voice low. "For how I handled that back there, I was out of line." Emily didn't know what to say. She'd expected a lot of things tonight. But an apology from a cop? That wasn't one of them. "You weren't out of line," she said quietly. I was rude. I shouldn't have snapped at you." "You were frustrated," Daniel said. "There's a difference." "Still," Emily murmured, staring down at her coffee. "You were just doing your job. Get that?" Daniel leaned back in the booth, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "How long have you been a nurse?" 5 years, Emily said. "Straight out of college. That's a tough job." "It is," she admitted. "But it's worth it. Most days." "What about tonight?" Emily let out a hollow laugh. "Tonight was rough. One of those nights where you question why you even do it." "Patient?" She nodded. "Elderly man. Coded twice. We got him back, but..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "I don't know if he'll make it through the week." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then softly he said, "You did your job. That's all you can do." Emily looked up at him, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. "Yeah, I guess. You work doubles often?" "More than I'd like," she said with a tired smile. "But I need the money. My brother's starting college in the fall and..." She stopped herself. "Sorry, you don't need to hear about my life. I asked," Daniel said simply. Emily studied him. This man who'd gone from intimidating to kind in the span of 20 minutes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "The coffee, the checking on me. You don't even know me." Daniel was silent for a long moment. He stared down at his mug, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he wasn't sure he wanted to say. Finally, he spoke. "I had a sister," he said quietly. "Sophia, she was a teacher, worked long hours, always stayed late to help her students." He paused, his throat tightening. "One night, she was driving home. Too tired, too distracted. She didn't see the red light." Emily's breath caught. She was hit by a drunk driver, Daniel continued, his voice flat now, emotionless. "Died on impact. She was 31. "Oh my God," Emily whispered. "I'm so sorry." Daniel looked up at her, and for just a moment, she saw the pain in his eyes, raw, unfiltered. "That's why I became a cop," he said. "To stop people like that driver. To make sure what happened to her doesn't happen to someone else." He took a breath. "But tonight when I saw you, tired, frustrated, just trying to get home," he shook his head. "I saw her. And I realized I was about to make your night worse when all you needed was help." Emily's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I didn't know. You couldn't have," Daniel said. "But that's on me. I let my own stuff cloud my judgment." They sat in silence for a while, 2 strangers sharing a moment of understanding that neither of them had expected. Finally, Emily took a sip of her coffee, and for the first time that night, she felt the weight begin to lift. The morning sun filtered through the windows of County General Hospital, painting the hallways in soft gold. Emily moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, her steps light despite the exhaustion still clinging to her bones. She'd gone home after the diner, slept for 4 hours, and returned for another shift. 'Cause that's what she did. That's who she was. But today felt different. She couldn't stop thinking about the night before. About Officer Reyes. About the way he'd looked at her, not with judgment, but with understanding. About the story he'd told her. The pain in his voice when he spoke about his sister, it had stayed with her. All through the night, all through the morning, she was checking vitals on a patient in room 304 when she heard Doris, the receptionist at the front desk, call her name over the intercom. Emily Carter. "You have a visitor at the main entrance." Emily frowned. A visitor? She wasn't expecting anyone. She finished with her patient, made a quick note on the chart, and headed toward the lobby. As she rounded the corner, she stopped short. Standing near the entrance, looking slightly out of place in his uniform, was Daniel Reyes. He held something in his hand, a small, laminated card. Her hospital ID badge. Emily's hand flew to her pocket, where she usually kept it clipped, empty. She must have left it in the car, or at the diner. She couldn't even remember. Daniel spotted her and walked over, his expression calm but unreadable. "You left this," he said, holding out the badge. "Thought you might need it." Emily took it, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. "Thank you." Didn't even realize it was gone. "Figured," Daniel said with a small smile. "You had a lot on your mind." They stood there for a moment, the noise of the hospital swirling around them, phones ringing, patients being called, the hum of machines and voices blending into a constant background symphony. "You didn't have to come all the way here," Emily said softly. "I was in the area," Daniel replied. Though they both knew it wasn't true, Emily smiled. "Right." Daniel glanced around the hospital, taking it in. "This is where you work?" "Every day," Emily said. "Well, like most days. Must be tough." "It is," she admitted. "But it's also rewarding. When you save someone, when you make a difference, it makes it worth it." Daniel nodded slowly. "I get that." Before Emily could respond, a voice called out from down the hall. "Nurse Carter, we need you in 312. Emily turned, her body already shifting into work mode. She looked back at Daniel, apologetic. "I have to go," Daniel said quickly. "I'll get out of your way." But he didn't leave. Instead, he watched as Emily hurried down the hall, her movements swift and purposeful. He watched as she entered room 312, where an elderly woman lay in bed, her face pale and drawn. He watched as Emily took the woman's hand, her voice soft and soothing, calming her with just a few words. And he saw it. The same kindness she'd lacked the night before. The same patience, the same care. He'd misjudged her completely. She wasn't rude. She wasn't disrespectful. She was just human, tired, overwhelmed, doing her best in a world that demanded everything from her. Daniel stood there for a few more minutes, watching from a distance, then quietly turned and walked toward the exit. But as he reached the door, he heard her voice behind him. "Officer Reyes." He stopped and turned. Emily was standing in the hallway, her hands clasped in front of her. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but warm. "For last night, for everything," Daniel nodded. "Take care of yourself, Emily," she smiled. "Too." And with that, he walked out into the morning light and feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. 3 weeks had passed since that night at the intersection. 3 weeks since Emily's car had stalled, and Officer Daniel Reyes had pulled up behind her. Lights flashing, ready to write a ticket. 3 weeks since everything had changed. Emily hadn't seen him since that morning at the hospital. She'd thought about him more than once, wondered if he was okay, wondered if he still thought about his sister the way she thought about the patients she couldn't save. But life had a way of moving forward, whether you were ready or not. And so Emily kept working, kept pushing through the long shifts, kept taking care of Marcus, who was now deep into college applications and scholarship essays. Tonight, her shift had ended early. A rare gift. She'd clocked out at 10, changed out of her scrubs, and walked out into the cool evening air. The parking lot was quieter than usual, just a few scattered cars under the dim streetlights. She pulled her keys from her bag and headed toward her Honda, and stopped, leaning against the hood of his patrol car. Parked right next to hers was Daniel Reyes. He held 2 paper cups of coffee, steam rising from the lids. When he saw her, he straightened, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Evening, Nurse Carter," he said. Emily blinked, then laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. "What are you doing here?" "I was in the area," Daniel said, echoing his words from weeks ago. Emily crossed her arms, grinning. "You're a terrible liar, Officer Reyes. Call me Daniel," he said, offering her one of the cups. "And I figured you might need this." Emily took it, the warmth seeping into her hands. "You didn't have to do this, I know," Daniel said. "But I wanted to." They stood there in the parking lot, two people who'd met in the worst possible way, now standing together in something that felt almost like friendship. "How's your car?" Daniel asked, "Still dying on me," Emily admitted with a sheepish smile. "But I'm getting the alternator fixed next week." "Good," Daniel said. "That thing's a death trap. It's gotten me this far," Emily said, patting the hood affectionately. They were quiet for a moment, sipping their coffee, the night settling around them like a blanket. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I've been thinking about that night," he said quietly. "About what I said. About Sophia." Emily looked at him, her expression soft. "You don't have to." "I want to," Daniel interrupted gently. "I don't talk about her much. It's easier that way. But talking to you, it helped. More than I expected." Emily's chest tightened. "I'm glad. You remind me of her," Daniel continued. "Not in looks, but in spirit. The way you care. The way you fight for people." He paused. "She would have liked you." Emily's eyes stung with tears, but she blinked them back. "I would have liked her too." Daniel smiled, a real, genuine smile. "So, I was thinking, uh-oh," Emily teased. "That sounds dangerous." "Maybe," Daniel said with a laugh. "But hear me out. I know you work crazy hours, and I know you're probably exhausted most of the time. But," he hesitated, "if you ever need someone to talk to, or if you just need company on the drive home, I'm around." Emily's heart skipped. "Are you offering to be my personal escort, officer?" "Something like that," Daniel said, his ears turning slightly red. "No ticket this time, I promise." Emily laughed, and the sound bright and warm. "Okay, deal." They stood there a little longer, talking about nothing and everything. About work, about life, about the little things that made the hard days bearable. And when Emily finally climbed into her car, Daniel walked to his patrol car, but didn't drive away. He waited, engine idling, until she pulled out of the lot. Then, just like that night 3 weeks ago, he followed her. Not as a cop, but as a friend, and as Emily drove through the quiet streets, her coffee still warm in the cup holder, she realized something. She wasn't alone anymore. Neither of them were. Two souls, worn down by duty and loss, had found something unexpected in each other. Not romance, not pity, respect, and maybe, just maybe, a reason to keep going. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another one. Drop a comment below and tell us what you thought. We love hearing from you. And remember, sometimes the people who seem the hardest on us are fighting battles we know nothing about. Stay kind, stay strong, and we'll see you in the next story.